Alright, so we've got a Trailbreaker 3 frame, believe it is, that got resprayed and a disc weld put on it. I think it's pretty cool color as well. We don't see this color much. It's pretty unique. Got these black forks and disc tabs as well. Nice welds there. Zip stem, zip bars. You can see the curve on this. 14T Surly cog, Surly chain tensioner, FSA headset, Thompson seat post, Brooks grips, and we've got this Dub BB SRAM and also SRAM Rival Dub D1 cranks and Avid BB7 brakes. Also these wheels here, pretty cool with the Pan Racers 26.2.1. Okay, so the first thing I got to do is I got to open up this seat collar. You can see it's being bent a little bit, bent inside, and then you can see the metal at the bottom is kind of deformed where the keyhole is, so it's definitely pushed in. So this runs a 26.8 seat post and it doesn't go in at all. So the first thing I did was basically use a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and I'm going to wedge this piece of metal that I had lying around. It's about 2.5 millimeters thick, I reckon. And the reason why I'm putting this in here is because I want to get a little bit more leverage to open this up without damaging where the bolt goes through. So yeah, just wedge it in there. It took a little bit, but it slid in there prior to open with the flathead screwdriver. And then here I'm just bending it back and forth. And then this is another seat post I had that was the same size, 26.8, because I don't want to scratch up the Thompson. You can see even with the beveled edge, it doesn't even go in that much at all. So I just repeated the process. When you're doing this, just make sure you do a little bit at a time. I didn't want to crack the paint, and I didn't want to crack the frame because that would have been real bad. So just take your time, go super slow, and just go a little bit by little bit. You can see I did a little bit at a time, and yeah, it's better to go little than go ham, because once you break it, you can't fix it. But yeah, here just taking my time, you can see eventually it started to fit in. But what happened is it would actually sit on the keyhole area. So yeah, it would slide down a little bit, but then because the keyhole is deformed, I'd have to push it out somehow. But you can see here, just like looking at it, I've made the binder parallel to each other. I decided to sand it down a bit. You can't really see it being deformed inside the keyhole or looking down the pipe, but you can feel it with your finger like a tiny bit. So here, real careful again, use a round screwdriver and just try to bend it out at the bottom of the keyhole. Just bend it out a tiny bit, and then yeah, just repeat that process. Once again, patience go a long way here. Make sure you clean it out before you sand it. And yeah, eventually it slid through with my old 26.8. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll chuck the Thompson in here, see if this fits. And then yeah, the Thompson didn't fit. So I was like, it was pretty close, but it was still super tight. So I decided not to risk it because I don't want to scratch it up. And then just pried it open just a tiny bit more. And then I think I also, after doing this, I gave it one more final sand. And then yeah, that was it. And here you see going in. You can still see it's still a nice snug fit. It's not loose at all. It sits in there. I can still move it up and down with just a little bit of friction. I don't have to push down too hard on it. And I think that's looking good. And then here you can see minimal damage to the paint, minimal damage to yeah, the inside of the seat post. You can see a little bit of scratching inside there, but I think overall pretty good. A little bit on the keyhole, but yeah, overall I would say this was pretty successful. And then here I'm just showing you again like how much friction it takes to push it down. Still nice, a pretty nice snug fit, I reckon. And yeah, I think the seat post looks really good against the paint. Got to get a binding bolt for the seat post. And yeah, when you take it out, you can check it for any scratches or anything. But yeah, it's completely clean. Alright, so I'm going to install the headset. Got my crown race install tool, headset install tool, some grease, and then yeah, the headset, of course. So basically, you got the cups that go on top. Okay, so you got the top cup and the bottom one. This goes on the fork, so it sits like that. And then we're going to install that later once we work out the height. And then this goes on top like that. Doesn't actually go on the top, it goes on the inside. So yeah, just putting some grease on. And I have a headset crown install tool, so just put the crown on there, and yeah, usually you just tap it in. But for some reason this was like super tight. I think it's because it got painted, so added a couple of mils to it. I need to sand it down to help it fit in there. If I didn't sand it down and just try to bash it on there, that crown race is just aluminum, so it would kind of wreck it. So yeah, I think it's better just to sand it back a little bit, and then yeah, save yourself a lot of trouble. And then yeah, just when you're tapping it, just make sure it's straight, and you don't need tons of power to tap it on. Basically, I'm just using the weight of the tool, and then just raising it up a little bit, and then dropping it slightly at the beginning to get it straight. You can check both sides to make sure it's nice and even. And then yeah, just tap it down. It sounds louder here on the video, but yeah, really not that much pressure at all, and you should be able to get that on. It should be a pretty tight fit. Alright, next thing, just cleaned it off and installing the headset. So yeah, when I was putting grease on the headset, I noticed the inside of the stereo tube was a little bit scratchy, and yeah, I think this is because it got painted, got some paint on the inside of the head tube as well. So yeah, I decided to sand it down a little bit. Hopefully this would work. And then so I sanded both sides down, but then I felt the bottom of the head tube was kind of really bad. So yeah, you can see it's kind of like all gunged up there. I tried sanding a bit more, but the sandpaper only did so much. So I decided to just scrape it off with a screwdriver. You can see here's after sanding. I used a little bit of WD-40, hopefully it dissolves some of the paint. I don't think it does, but I sanded it a bit more, and yeah, it didn't really do too much, so I ended up using a wire brush to scrape off the paint, and I ended up just using a screwdriver. Of course, be careful when you're doing this. Try not to scratch it up too much. And then I ended up using a razor blade just to kind of scrape it off. And then yeah, just to finish it off once again with the sandpaper. But yeah, after that, looking fresh. You can see I didn't sand all the way to bare metal. I just sanded it enough so the headset would fit in there. And then yeah, make sure you grease up your headset cups. Yeah, again, you could always try installing it without setting it back. It's the same with the crown race. You could bang it on, but yeah, sometimes it's not worth damaging the frame. You got to think of it long term. If someone wants to take the headset off, if you just bang it on there, it's going to be hard to get it off. Also, you could damage the cups, and you could damage the head tube as well. So yeah, a little sanding goes a long way, I think. Yeah, so here basically just putting the headset tool on there, just bolt it on. Just make sure it's straight as possible. Here also what you want to do is line up your logos on your headset cups. Make sure they're nice and straight. Sometimes they have a little bit of writing, and you can gauge where the center is. And then here, yeah, just take your time, go slowly wind down those nuts. And I just use a ratchet on the bottom, a wrench on the top, going slowly, and just make sure it's straight when you're doing it. If it's not straight, just try to align it again, put more pressure on the other side, and yeah, that's basically it. I think the headset looking pretty good now. Put a little bit of grease on that race there, and then that's it. Clamp it down. You can see it doesn't stay, but yeah, it doesn't matter. You can put the other bit on top. So this is the inner race for the top of the headset, and then just make sure you grease that up as well. And then also, yeah, just a top cap. This one has a little bit of a rubber thing in it, so it'll hold the fork in position. But yeah, that's basically it. Usually you think installing a headset's pretty simple. You just put it in, but yeah, sometimes you gotta do a little bit of sanding, pay a little bit of attention to the parts, and then yeah, it's worth it in the long run. Alright, so yeah, just chucking the stem on for now, just to keep the fork on. Yeah, this one uses a torque bolt instead of Allen, and basically when you do it up, just do it up alternatively. This one is 5 Newton meters, so not too tight, but yeah, if you're just using it to hold the fork on, you can just do it so it's just tight enough. And yeah, that's basically it. I think the stem looks pretty cool. Alright, so I'm going to just put the wheels on so I can get the brakes going. Haven't got the cables and stuff yet, but since these are going to be disc brakes, I just want to put them on to make sure they work. And I can align them and everything for now. Yeah, you can see it's pretty windy outside, so yeah, I just chucked them on, quick release, no problems. And yeah, I just brought it inside to put the brakes on. Alright, so putting on the brakes. Yeah, so these are Avid BB7 road brakes. First you just tighten it onto the frame. Next you just keep these kind of loose so the caliper can move. And then this brake is kind of cool. You have these 2 dials on either side where if you tighten them up, it will push the pads in closer towards the rotor. Alright, so when you're adjusting this, the rotor is meant to be a little bit closer to the inside. You can see the diagram there. But yeah, I was fiddling around with this, and for some reason I couldn't get it straight, or I couldn't get it working without it scraping. And I realized it was because the caliper was touching the bracket. So yeah, after that I just got sick of the back one, so I was like, you know what, I'll try the front one. Hopefully that works out first, and I can move back to the back one. But yeah, I put the front one on and it was no problem. You can see where the caliper, how close it is to the rotor, so it's about 3 to 4 mil on both sides. That's how it should be, pretty even. So yeah, I end up getting the front working pretty well. You can hear that it spins, and I can just use the brake. Yeah, just like that. So yeah, back to the back one. I placed it on how it should sit, and you can see here it's kind of on an angle compared to the bracket. Here the spacing is even on both sides, so that's kind of how it should fit. However, it is touching the little weld bit, so yeah, I don't know if it was the welding or was a different bracket, but you can see if you put the bracket on backwards, it actually lines up pretty even, pretty parallel. So I think that's the way it should be. I've tried a different bracket, and you can see this bracket also has a inside edge, which actually doesn't allow me to run it backwards because the brake pads kind of sit in there. So what I decided to do was I had some spare spaces, and I was going to try to make it work with this angle as best as possible. So just sanding down these little I don't know what they call it, like spacer cones. But you can see, yeah, this ended up being the closest I get. So this is probably like 1.5 mil more. The front bit is good, I think, pretty close. And you can see there's a little gap on the bottom of the caliper. Yeah, you actually need the little gap for the caliper to align properly, because you need the caliper to be able to tilt. And I'm just using the Butte Bike caliper alignment tool here. I did do the front one without it. You can do it without it, but this back one was a little bit tricky. and just the tool made it a lot easier. Yeah, so I think this is the best solution. I try using less spacers, but the caliper can only go down so much because otherwise it'll hit the well bracket. And yeah, you can see I put 2 spacers on the left hand side just to even that tilt. And I think this is the best case scenario. I think one other option what you can do is you can actually like sand or take off the tab on the disc pad, but then you got to do that every time, so that would be annoying. So yeah, ended up doing this. Alright, next thing, just putting the handlebar on. Not too much to it really. I think the only thing different was it uses torque bolt bit instead of an Allen. But yeah, just a zip bar. I put the stem on this way. I think it looks a little bit better. I think you can flip it around upside down as well. They have the logo on the other side upside down. But yeah, this is pretty easy. The front of the bars actually has a little kind of like grid thing that you can line up. And what you want to do is just make sure the spacing is even on the front plate, top and bottom, and then do up your bolts in a star pattern. And then I just aligned the bars here so the top of the bar is flat because they're a little bit arrow. I'm sure we can tweak these later. Looking pretty fresh. Alright, installing the BB. So yeah, it's a dub BB, so all you have to do is follow basically, it's almost the same as Holotech I think, so you just grease up your tapers on the inside and then basically just take one side off, the right side, and then you can just slide it on. Alright, so the BB came with some spacers, and to figure out what to use you can go on their website and look at a guide, measure your bottom bracket width and also your crankset. However, it can be a little bit tricky because for vintage mountain bikes the rear spacing is a little different and can throw it off. But what I decided to do was add a 2.5 on each side and use this 12-notch BB tool to put it in. And I just tighten up by hand first, just to make sure it threads in nicely and make sure it's straight, make sure you don't cross thread it. And once that's in, you just tighten it down with a shifter. You can also use a ratchet, but I don't have a ratchet this size, so I ended up using just a shifter. And it's 50 Newton meters, so that's pretty tight. And then the next thing you do is you can grease up the crank arm spindle or the inside of the BB. And yeah, it already had grease on all the stuff. When you buy the stuff new, they put grease on there, so I'm just putting a little extra just in case. And then yeah, you just basically do both sides. And to put the crank arm in, you just basically just grab it and just push it in. It's just friction fit. And for the first time, I'm not using any spacers just because I want to make sure I'll be able to line up my chain line and make sure it fits. So I just tighten it on there. You just use an 8mm wrench. This is 50 Newton meters again, so pretty tight. And yeah, you can see it spins pretty good. So once I put that in, because I'm not running any spacers, you can see the crank moves back and forth. And then what I decided to do was push it all the way to the right and then just line up my crank arm. So you can see the crank arm here away from the chainstay. It's about 5mm and it's about 5mm on the drive side. And then I ended up measuring that gap for the spacer, so it's a 4.5mm spacer if anyone else is trying to do this. And then yeah, I just put that on the drive side and tighten it back down again. And yeah, that was basically it. Pretty simple. They say bang it a little bit to make sure it's fully seated, but yeah, I don't think it changed anything here. And then they have this cool little adjustment knob where you can tighten the kind of pressure on the cranks. So basically I just do this by hand. You just want to do it enough so it's kind of touching the BB and it spins nicely. You'll get a feel for it, like tighten it and then spin the arm crank. If it's too tight, untighten it. And then once that gets to a good position for you, there's this little bolt at the top that you can tighten up. They also stress not to over tighten this bolt, just tighten it enough for it not to move. Alright, that's basically it for the cranks. The chain line turned out pretty perfect. So yeah, this is helpful in case the person wants to switch out for cassette in the future, then you don't have to readjust the cranks. And then you just tighten this little cap. This is just 5 newton meters, and that's it. That's the cranks done. Alright, now putting on the rear cog with the spacers. So what you want to do is to line up the cog with the front chainring. I found the best way to do this is just use a measuring tape and just make sure it's flat against the chainring, and then it goes all the way to your hub. And then you kind of got to guess it. Kind of just remember where I put it, and then this is the single speed spacers with the lock ring on the end. And then yeah, you just chuck it on. Make sure there's enough room for your cap to kind of close all the way, and I just do it finger tight here. And then you can see this is the first time I've done it, and it was a bit off, so I'm going to change the spacer. So I repeated the process, and yeah, you can see this is way better. And then this is a lock ring tightening tool. It slides in there. You got to take the skewer off, and then just tighten it pretty good. And then that was all done. Alright, so putting on the levers, what you need to do is just peel back the rubber bit, and then that'll usually expose an Allen key on top. Some levers are different. Some go through the lever in the front, but these newer ones, they usually have different access. And then just make sure the levers are in a good place. I try to have them horizontal to the top of the bars. These bars are pretty cool because it lets you have a little gauges and markings on the side, so you can keep them both even on both sides. And then as you're doing this, just make sure for both positions that your hands are comfortable. So here you can see I'm in the drops. I can reach it with my finger, and then it feels pretty good pulling them in. And then also on the hoods, just make sure that feels good as well. And yeah, that's pretty good. I just have them done up kind of tight, not super tight position. You can see they're both completely flat on top to the top of the bar, and then the position, they kind of flare in a little bit just to match how the bars are kind of flared as well. Alright, just putting the seat post in, and here this bolt has a little tab on the side, so you can kind of adjust your seat post without it spinning around. And then here, just don't forget to lube up your seat post, some grease so it doesn't stick, and yeah, just clean it up, and that's looking pretty good. So yeah, I already spent work cleaning the inside of the seat tube out. If you haven't done that, you might need to just give it a clean before you put the seat post in. And here, just installing the star nut for the steerer, and basically just wind down the bolt all the way down and then tap it in. You can see it was a little crooked when I tapped it in, but you can easily fix that. I just end up putting on another bolt in there just to tap it out sideways. You can see here, you just want it completely horizontal to the top. And yeah, pretty straightforward, not too much to it. And then yeah, just tying it up. I just did it loose for now because I'm going to install the brakes and stuff a bit later on, but you can see it all fits. Here, putting on the seat, the rook seat. I think it looks pretty cool with the seat posts, silver seat posts. And yeah, just do it up. Alright, putting this Surly single speed tensioner on. So yeah, in the instructions they do have different ways of setting it up in case you had a 1/8 or 3/32 cog. This one's 3/32, so I don't need to switch anything around, and then it gives you 2 springs as well, depending on the chain is above the pulley or below the pulley. I think it's set for the chain to be below, but if you need to have the chain above, you can switch out the spring. They provide an extra spring, which is pretty good. And here, just screwing it on. yeah, nothing special here. I think because this frame got painted, I had to just kind of work it in a little bit because the threads had a little bit of paint on it. But yeah, basically just take your time and just make sure it's straight every time, and then slowly just wind it in, unwind it, wind it in, and then it should fit pretty good. And then yeah, there we go. I just set it to about this tension for now. And then what you want to do is align the other cog to your rear cog, the little pulley to the cog. Just make sure it's lined up, and there's this little Allen key that you can tighten that lets you slide that cog forward and backwards. All right, installing the brakes. So because sometimes it's hard to size for the person, what I like to do is just put it up a little bit higher, and then what you can do is just cable it like this, and then they can adjust how they see fit. Eventually I will size it and then maybe cut the steerer down as well. And then here just I'd like to pre-size all the cable before I install. That way you know you're not going to have any issues. Just make sure you measure it a few times to get it right, because once you cut it you can't you can't make it longer. Alright, this is how the cable goes in. It goes on the inside of these levers, in case anyone else is trying to install these. And then for this bike, I'm going to install these Avid BB Faru adjusters, barrel adjusters. So yeah, basically on a normal brake, you have a barrel adjuster where you can adjust the tension. This one doesn't have one on the caliper either, so the only way you can adjust the tension is either pull it, but installing these things allow you to have a little bit of a micro adjustment where needed. But yeah, basically one cable fits on the end, another cable fits there, and you can kind of turn it, and it moves the barrel up and down to lengthen or shorten the cable. One extra note, make sure the Faru that you're using on the end of the cable, this black thing, make sure it spins inside the barrel adjuster. I had to make sure I'm using the right one. Alright, the next thing to do is just I had to decide where to put those barrel adjusters. So most people put them kind of near the cockpit so you can kind of adjust them on the fly. I think having them kind of underneath the stem would be kind of cool. Also, you want to put them in an area where they're not going to like clang onto anything when you're riding, or yeah, that could get pretty annoying. But yeah, I think kind of under the stem will look pretty good, and also it's not so close to the handlebar where it's going to start tapping. And then yeah, just feed the cable through the lever there, and then yeah, these Avids, you kind of just got to pull them tight, and yeah, just do it up tight. Depending on your cable slack, you might need to push that little pivot up before you tighten it, just like that. But yeah, mine end up working pretty well. And then you can just test your levers, see how much pull you want on the lever, and then you can adjust the barrel adjuster to make it tighter or looser. So yeah, you just kind of just turn it. And yeah, you can see it's tighter now, so I think that's pretty good. Make sure your rim it's not touching the brake pads, and then yeah, it's good to go. And here, measuring the back cable, you can see it kind of just make sure you measure it a couple of times. Also, because this is not a disc frame, there need to be some type of holder for the cable, and Joel actually gave me these bolts previously that it didn't use, and I end up just finding something in there that I could kind of make it a little bit cleaner for the cable tie. So I think that's pretty cool. I think these were old, maybe old fender mounts or something, but yeah, ended up working pretty well. I think it looks pretty good. It looks pretty clean, just mounted on the rack boss. All right, and basically did the same thing for the rear brake. You can see here, yeah, don't forget to I put a little bit of tape in just to hold the cable there, just sticky tape. And you can see here I have the cable going on the other side of the bike, on the left hand side of the bike, but I think going on the right hand side makes it a little bit cleaner, and then you can kind of turn the handlebars, and they're not overlapping, the cables are not putting pressure on each other. So I think that's looking pretty good. And because I switched the cable over, I have to move the cable to the inside just for a little bit of a smoother line. And then just the same thing with the other brake cable, just feed it through, same process. And then yeah, just cutting off the ends, putting on the zip tie. I also like to cut it off with a knife, and you can also file it down if you want, but this cut was pretty clean. And then yeah, putting on the bar tape here. So it came with this extra bit that didn't have a pattern on it, so I decided to cut that off because it would look kind of weird without some of the pattern on the bar. And then when you're wrapping, just take your time. I like to go from the inside, wrapping to the outside. That way when you kind of grip down on the drop bars, it's kind of tightening the grip as you go. And then it came with these little extra bits as well. So what I did was just kind of trim them to make sure they fit similar to where the lever goes, to make sure they're flush. Sometimes you need to cut it a few times, but just try your best. And then some people like to do figure eight. For these thicker bar tapes, you can't do figure eight because it just gets so thick and also covers up too much of the lever, and then your hoods won't sit on right. So for this one, just up and under, and you can see kind of how it looks. I think it looks pretty cool. And yeah, my tips for bar tape is just try to make it pretty even. And yeah, just cut off straight up the top. Make sure it's nice and snug on there. And here, yeah, just cutting it a few times. But yeah, I just show you from the top. You can see how it's kind of flush. So I ended it where the bars kind of start going round again. So for these bars, they go flat and they go round. And I just ended it just before it starts going round again, just to make sure I got nice even bar tape. And just putting the end cap on, just push it in hard and try to tuck all the ends in. But yeah, pretty happy with this job. This tape, fabric tape, came with the bar tape, so I just used that. And then the same on the other side. Sometimes it might take you a few wraps to get the spacing right, but yeah, it's worth it. You can also count the layers if you want to match it even on both sides. And what I like to do is measure the top of the bar from where the tape is, where the black tape is, so both sides are even. And then yeah, you just make a little mark and then just tape it up to there. I think these are looking pretty sweet, pretty happy with how it turned out. Alright, checking on the pedals. The cranks actually came with these two washers for the pedals, so that will save it from digging into the crank arm, which is pretty smart, I think. So yeah, just put on the washer there, don't forget to grease it up, and then just make sure you're turning it the right way. And yeah, I did both sides, and then just make sure you check the tightness after you put the pedals on. I like to do that just to make sure they're on tight enough. Last thing you want is a loose pedal, and that was looking good. Alright, next thing to do was cut the steerer down. So yeah, Joe actually came around and we talked about how high he wanted it, and we measured up his old road bike as well, just to steer height and also the handlebar height, and then a few other measurements. And then just ended up cutting this one just a tiny bit higher than his road bike, so he has a little bit of adjustment up and down just in case he wants just to have a little bit more of a lax ride. So here you can see me sizing it, just measuring it. I end up marking it with an old razor blade just on the other side, the blunt side. And then also make sure you allow the gap for the stem cap to kind of push in as well. I think that's a couple of millimeters as well, so make sure you take that into account. Measure it a few times. You can see here after I measured it and marked it, I'm still just double checking, because yeah, basically once you cut it, that's it. You can't glue it back on. But yeah, after I did that, I just took the handlebars off and took the forks off again. Again, this is probably a little bit easier before you build the bike, but yeah, I wanted to get everything on there, and it ended up not being too bad as well. So yeah, I was happy with this. Here I'm using an old seat post adapter for like a rear rack or fender or lock or something like that, and you just clamp it around where you mark the line to cut the steerer, and then don't forget to tap down the star nut. I just use a screwdriver. Just make sure the diameter of the screwdriver is small enough for you to tap it down. And then here's how I measured it to make sure the star nut was far enough down. And then after that, just use the hacksaw. Now that I have the little clamp as a guide, it will give me a straight cut. And yeah, just take your time, cut through. And then when you get to the very end, what you want to do is hold the other end, so it ends up being as straight as possible. And that was done. You can see the result. You can see the steerers, the star nuts tapped down far enough, and then I just file it down with a file. If you have sandpaper, you can kind of like sand it down as well, just to take all the burrs off. Make sure you do kind of like the outside and the inside. So yeah, so no one's kind of cutting their hands on that. They're changing the stem height. And then yeah, you want to wipe off everything. Make sure it's clean. Make sure you don't get any shavings between the steerer or on your headset, because you don't want that scraping along as well. And then here, just putting the steerer back in, putting the stem spacers back on. Make sure everything's clamped down properly. Putting the wheel back on, putting the caliper back on. Make sure it's done up tight. And here, just taking off the stem cap again, just making sure that the steerer bolt in there is nice and straight. And then yeah, putting everything back on. And then I use the torque wrench for the stem again, 5 Newton meters on those bolts. Just alternate the bolts. So yeah, after cutting the steerer, you can see that the cable's now a little bit long. So what I ended up doing was just taking off the housing and just chopping them down maybe like an inch for a smoother cable line. And that was it. So yeah, I want to adjust the brakes a little bit more, get them a little bit more dialed. I've got this wolf tooth little disc bender tool thing. It's also a bottle opener. But yeah, basically you can just put it on your rotor and just bend it a little bit. You don't have to push it too hard. Just rotate the wheel, listen for scrapes, and then just bend it where appropriate. Depending on how straight your rotor is, sometimes it doesn't take that long, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But yeah, just take your time, and then eventually you'll have it dialed. And as you clear the pads, you can wind down your barrel adjuster to bring the pads in again, to get your brake pads a little bit tighter and more precise. After I did the back wheel, I did the front wheel, and then here just snipping off the cables and putting on the cable ends. And then here now we're applying the decals, so yeah, just make sure you clean up the frame really well. Joel got these custom decals made. I think they look pretty cool. So yeah, just take your time, make sure you line it up, and what I like to do is just put it on just lightly first, and here you can kind of take a look, make sure it's straight, make sure you double check it before you press it down, and then you should be good to go. If it's not straight, you can always rotate it. And then for the front, Joel wanted 3 of these stickers on the front. So to do that accurately, I need to measure it out. So I use a little bit of masking tape to kind of judge it vertically, and then for horizontally, I just use my eye. Just look down the tube, make sure it's nicely in the middle. Sometimes you can use a razor blade to put it on. Here I'm just using my fingers. The decals seem pretty good, so you don't have to be like super finicky with them. And then yeah, just make sure it's straight, lined up, and then once it is, push it down. Push it down from the middle to the outside edges so you don't get any air bubbles as well. And then once that was done, I could put the stickers on the top and bottom as well. And yeah, just follow the same procedure here. Line it up and stick it down. Alright, and then these ones on the down tube. I'm just placing it on here, just seeing it how far I want it down the down tube. But basically I matched the O to the other cable guide up the top. That seems like a pretty nice area for it to have it. And then for this side, you just kind of freestyle it, make sure it lines up with the top of the tube and the bottom of the tube. I think these tubes are a little bit easier because they're a little bit flatter and it's easier to gauge. But yeah, you can see I'm taking like a lot of time just to make sure I get in the right position before you put it down. And then here, step back and take a look again, make sure it's where you want it before you push it down. When you're pushing it down, make sure you get all the air bubbles out, or make it as flat as possible on all the edges. And then as you're peeling it, peel it away from the decal, like the opposite side, and it should come off pretty clean. If the decal does come up, you can put the backing back on and push it back down. But yeah, these are pretty great. The adhesive was really strong on these. And here, same on the other side. So for the other side, you want to match it up with the first side you did. So I just use masking tape again, just to kind of line up both the letters on each side, so that it'd be nice and even. And then yeah, take your time, repeat the same process. And yeah, that's basically it. I think some people, if they have problems, they can use a hairdryer as well to kind of get the vinyl down. But yeah, these ended up not being a problem. But yeah, I think these are looking pretty awesome. Alright, just putting on a chain. There's an 8-speed chain because we want the 3/32 width to go with the rear cog. And what you want to do is just put it around the smallest cog and the chain ring, line it up and break it apart where it matches up. Also take into account you're going to have this chain comes with a quick link. It's not on all chains, but if it comes with one, you've got to take that account into the length as well. So yeah, I just broke it where it matched up and put the quick link on. You can just pull it and it should go tight. And then here I noticed that just my chain tension was kind of really loose. So what I want to do is tighten that up. So basically what I did was take the chain off and reposition the derailleur so it's bent back more, and then tighten up the bolt. And what that should do is give you enough tension. If it's not enough, just redo it. But you can see here it's pretty good, pretty tight, and that will stop it from jumping around when you're riding. Yeah, you can see it's pretty smooth here. Pretty happy with that. So I also decided to give the chain a quick clean because it was a little bit sticky. So just use that kind of soapy spray, and then after you clean it, make sure you re-lube it as well. So yeah, that was going pretty good, and that was the last thing. So here's the new bike. anyway, that's the video. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching. Yeah, shout out Joel who hit me up to do this build. Picked out all the parts and all the colors and everything. I think it looks super slick. Yeah, this is for his record label Dark Echo. You haven't seen it, check it out. I'll put all the links in the description. And yeah, I think it's a super cool bike. Let me know what you think. And yeah, shout out to anyone who bought merch, donated, and also the Patreon peeps. I did close down Patreon, but hopefully it frees me up to do a little more stuff in the future. And yeah, stay tuned for the next one. Peace.